Florida heat presses against the skin like a living thing, heavy and slow, the kind of heat that makes the air ripple and shimmer. And in Clearwater Springs, that heat was the backdrop of a story that would leave the town forever branded by tragedy, a story that began with a backyard pool and ended with the words, "alligator." Attack written across every screen in America. Julia Banks was 28 years old, bright, alive, loved in her small Florida town. Known not for recklessness, but for compassion, for a devotion that made her house a sanctuary for stray animals. Broken birds, orphaned opossums, wounded raccoons, the forgotten, the overlooked, the fragile things that needed someone to care, and she always said yes. Her neighbors spoke of her with affection, called her a hero, told stories of how she patched wings with tape and gauze, how she bottle-fed the smallest creatures at her kitchen table, how her laughter carried through the citrus trees that lined the edges of Clearwater Springs, a town better known for its fruit orchards than for survival stories, yet one that would soon become the ground zero of a predator instinct that refused to be denied. Among all the rescues, one stood apart, one that should never have been taken home, one that changed her life and ended it, a small, striped hatchling no longer than a hand. Found near the mudbanks of the Appalachie River, eyes bright with panic, body soft with youth. A creature that should have stayed in the swamp, but instead was wrapped in a towel and carried into a house that smelled of trust and human love. She named him Riff, short and sharp, a name that fit like a secret. And friends remembered the way she told the story, how she claimed he imprinted on her, how she said his eyes followed her like a child follows a mother, how she whispered that he was different, special, not a predator, but a bond. And for 5 years she built that bond every single day. At first he lived in a terrarium inside, heat lamps glowing, a shallow pool shimmering under her care, fed with turkey meat and supplements, trained with the soft tapping of a spoon against glass. A language between species that only she seemed to understand, a rhythm that grew into routine, and routine into belief, and belief into a dangerous illusion that trust could erase DNA. Riff grew, the way reptiles do, slowly at first, then suddenly a meter, then more scales. Darkening tail, thickening jaws, widening, eyes shifting from curious to watchful. And Julia expanded his world with him from terrarium to plastic pool, from plastic pool to masonry pond, in her backyard from tiny thing in a towel, to a living relic of prehistory, lounging beside her on Florida afternoons. She swam with him, floated beside him, laughed as his massive head rested on her lap, recorded videos that went viral, posted photos that showed an alligator in a suburban pool, acting like a dog, comments splitting the internet, some calling it beautiful, others calling it insane, and the keywords repeated like omens across every platform: predator instinct, ticking, time bomb, death, roll waiting. Wildlife agents came with warnings, their voices calm, professional, the kind of tone built from years of field experience, telling her again and again, no matter how tame you think an alligator looks in your backyard pool, no matter how many times it rests its head on your lap, the DNA never changes, the instincts never leave. The death roll is written into every bone and every muscle fiber, and love cannot erase it. But warnings are just words, until the water runs red, and Julia smiled them away. Certain that Riff was different, certain that her bond had built something beyond instinct, certain that trust was enough. And trust became the lullaby she sang to herself every time she stepped barefoot into the pool. Every time she placed her hand on his snout, every time she ignored the weight of a prehistoric predator moving under her water. Neighbors heard the growls, low and guttural, rolling through chain-link fences, felt the vibration of a tail strike like thunder against steel, saw the blur of a launch that rattled dogs and shook children, and they told her, pleaded with her, warned her. But she waved them off, told them he was misunderstood, told them he only needed trust, told them that love was stronger than instinct, and every warning became background noise, fading behind the warmth of affection. By the summer of 2023, Riff was over 2.5 meters long, weighing nearly 140 kilos, a mass of muscle coiled in stillness, a machine designed by evolution to ambush and kill. His eyes cold and watchful, his body heavy with strength, his tail, a weapon capable of knocking down an adult with one strike. His jaws, doors that once closed, did not open, Yet Julia still called him her companion, still believed the bond would save her. This is how every survival story begins, with trust that blinds, with love that believes, with routine that feels safe until it isn't, with the assumption that danger is gone until danger wakes up, with the comfort of a backyard pool on a hot Florida afternoon, with the illusion that instinct can be erased by affection, and then with a crack in that illusion when instinct decides it has waited long enough. The day was like any other sun burning, air heavy, the smell of algae rising from the pool, the shimmer of green across the water. Julia carrying a skimmer and a bucket, preparing to clean the shallow end riff floating near the wall, still and silent, eyes half closed, body tense, the picture of calm to anyone who did not know what stillness means in a predator. Predators wait still until they move, and that stillness is the warning, the pause before the storm, the silence before the strike. The math of muscles calculating distance and force, and Riff held in that stillness, while Julia stepped into the water, confident. Routine, unaware that every second was counting down to the moment that would turn her pool into a headline, her trust into a tragedy, her story into a survival file. She dipped the skimmer, swept the water, watched the ripples spread, felt the weight of the sun on her shoulders, unaware that in that ripple was the beginning of the end, unaware that the predator instinct had risen, that the DNA she thought she had erased was awake, that the death roll was already written in the moment she stepped barefoot into the water. The sun leaned lower over Clearwater Springs, and shadows stretched thin across fences and citrus groves. The kind of afternoon where routine feels safe, where nothing seems urgent, where a backyard pool looks like a private slice of paradise. And yet that calm was already cracking under the weight of instincts older than memory. Julia dipped the skimmer again, sweeping green algae from the surface, humming softly to herself, unaware that every movement carried vibration through the water, unaware that vibration was language to a predator, unaware that language was already calling Riff from stillness to motion. Because for an alligator every ripple is a story, and this one said prey. He shifted beneath the surface, tail coiling, muscles tightening, body rising with the silent grace of something built for ambush, his eyes opening wider, reflecting the late afternoon sun like twin coins of cold fire. And though he had eaten earlier, though his stomach was heavy, instinct is not about hunger, instinct is about territory control, dominance, and the pool was his. From outside the fence, a neighbor paused, hearing the splash of water, the rhythm of skimmer against pool. Then the sound changed, deeper, sharper, a disruption in the ordinary, and she tilted her head, frowning, not yet alarmed, not yet certain, but sensing that something was wrong. The way animals sense storms before clouds gather, the way silence bends before a scream. Julia leaned farther into the pool, arm extending, net dragging, her focus on debris, her mind lulled by routine, her trust blinding her to the shift just beneath, because Riff was no longer floating, he was rising, his body gliding like a shadow uncoiling, his head lifting toward her leg, his mouth opening in silence, the silence before thunder. It happened with the speed of lightning, sudden, violent, absolute, his tail whipping against her knees, her balance shattering, her body plunging into the water, breath tearing from her throat in a burst of surprise. And before she could scream, his jaws clamped down on her right thigh. Pressure like fire and stone. Pain like lightning splitting her body in half. She screamed then, a sound ripped from lungs filled with shock and terror, a sound that carried over fences and gardens. A sound that made neighbors freeze in place, drop tools, grip phones, glance at each other in confusion. And then in dawning horror, as recognition bloomed, because everyone knew she swam with him, everyone knew. And everyone feared this day would come. Under the water, her body twisted, bubbles rising like frantic prayers, her hands pounding against his snout, nails scraping against scales, and Riff responded, not with release, but with instinct. Instinct older than time, instinct perfected in swamps and rivers for millions of years, the death roll, the spiral of bone and muscle designed to tear and drown, to end fights quickly and absolutely. The pool became a storm, water thrashing, waves slamming against tiles, her scream breaking into choked silence as the spin dragged her under, her lungs filling with chlorine and panic, her leg crushed in a vice that did not understand mercy. And above the surface, neighbors gathered at fences, their eyes wide, their mouths open, their voices stammering into phones, begging for help. One voice trembled into the emergency line, words tripping, blood in the pool, an alligator. She's screaming, she's going under, come now, please come now. And the operator's calm words fell against the chaos like paper against fire, promises of units on the way, sirens dispatched. But sirens run on roads, and predators run on seconds, and seconds were all she had. She surfaced once, gasping, eyes wild, hair plastered to her face, her mouth forming the word help. Her hands thrashing against the water, but before air could fill her chest, Riff spun again, dragging her back down, spinning her body in circles, limbs flailing, bones grinding. Water darkening, bubbles bursting like small explosions, and the pool shifted from blue to red. A neighbor named Clara dropped her gardening shears, heart hammering, feet stumbling toward the fence, her breath catching at the sight, her voice breaking into a scream. She's in the water. He's got her. He's killing her. Call. Call again. Hurry. And others pressed against windows, against chain link, against each other. Powerless to enter, powerless to stop a predator mid-roll. The sounds were unbearable. The slap of tail against water, the crunch of jaws tightening, the muffled cries breaking into gurgles. The splashes, like thunder against tile, the rhythm of violence that has no pause button, no mute, no end until one body stops moving. And in those moments every neighbor understood why agents had warned her, why instincts never sleep. Julia fought arms swinging fists, pounding nails, clawing at scales that felt like stone, her body burning with adrenaline, her mind racing with fragments of memory, faces of friends, echoes of laughter, promises unfulfilled, her will to live, thrashing as wildly as her body. But Riff's body was built for this, engineered by evolution for this single purpose, and will was not enough. Her chest convulsed, lungs seizing, water forcing its way into airways, pain exploding behind her ribs, and she broke the surface once more, her scream fractured into a single word, please, please. But the plea was swallowed by water and silence as his jaws clamped again, spinning, twisting, the world narrowing to darkness and weight, her body dragged deeper. Sirens wailed in the distance, their sounds slicing through humid air, their urgency pounding against the hearts of neighbors, but distance mocked them, mocked the promise of help, because, by the time help arrived, the pool had already become a battlefield, the backyard, a graveyard, the predator, a machine, and Julia the fragile thing she had once saved, now the one who needed saving. Clara pressed her phone to her ear, sobbing, telling the operator, she isn't moving, the water is red, please, God, please. And the line crackled with responses, hold on, stay calm, units are coming. But calm was impossible, patience impossible, because survival stories are not written in hours. They are written in seconds, in breaths, in the space between submerging and surfacing. The scene from above was chaos framed by sunlight, a backyard pool thrashing, red streaks swirling, neighbors screaming, sirens closing, and at the center of it all, a prehistoric predator enacting a ritual as old as swamps, as brutal as hunger, as final as drowning, and in that ritual, a young woman fought with everything she had left, fighting for breath, fighting for another second, fighting for a chance she would never have. And yet the story wasn't done, because predators are patient, predators are efficient, predators never waste. And even as sirens grew louder, as boots pounded against pavement, as gates rattled and opened, the pool remained a theater of instinct, the water thrashing, the death roll unrelenting, the jaws unyielding, the tragedy unstoppable. And neighbors could only watch, powerless witnesses to nature reclaiming its own. Sirens clawed through the humid Florida air, as rescue trucks barreled down narrow streets lined with citrus trees. Neighbors pressed against fences, their faces pale with fear. Children clutched to parents as the sound grew louder. The promise of help riding toward a backyard already drenched in chaos. A backyard pool that no longer belonged to its owner but to the predator who ruled it. Officers from Florida Wildlife Commission pushed through the gate first, boots slamming on concrete, poles in hand, their eyes snapping to the pool, and what they saw locked into their minds forever. The water roiling, frothing with violent force, streaks of crimson curling upward like smoke. And at the center, a massive alligator thrashing with a human body clutched in its jaws. Paramedics spilled in behind, cases clattering against pavement, voices barking instructions, but hesitation froze them for one half beat. Because this was not a car crash, not a fall, not a stroke. This was prehistoric fury in chlorinated water. This was the survival story they had trained for, in theory, but hoped never to face in reality. And the theory felt small against the sight of jaws and blood. Neighbors shouted, "She's under, she's drowning. He won't let go. Do something, please." And officers extended long capture poles, metal nooses snapping against the surface, trying to loop around the thick armored body, trying to push the beast back. But Riff's tail slammed against concrete, sending water and blood spraying. And the sound was a gunshot against the walls, terrifying, unrelenting. Julia surfaced then, limp in his jaws, her face ghost white, her hair plastered across her cheek, her eyes rolled back. Water streaming from her mouth, a gurgle rattling in her chest, and paramedics screamed, "Now, now, pull her." But the predator spun again, the infamous death roll tearing through the pool, her body twisting violently, the water exploding into another storm of red. A rescuer jammed his pole between the jaws, pushing with desperate strength. Another hooked the tail, straining, cursing under his breath, adrenaline burning through his arms, and for a split second the jaws parted. Just enough for Julia's body to slip free, her torso bobbing upward, limp, still, blood trailing from shredded flesh, her chest unmoving, her lips blue. Paramedics dove forward, hauling her over the edge, laying her across the concrete, shouting vitals, no pulse. Shallow breath, start compressions, mask, bag her now, and hands pounded against her chest. Forcing rhythm into silence, air into lungs drowned in chlorine and blood. While behind them officers still battled Riff, shoving poles, firing tranquilizer darts, shouting orders through clenched teeth. The tranquilizer hit, then another, shafts quivering against thick hide, the predator thrashing, roaring in a guttural hiss that rattled ribs. His tail lashing against the pool edge hard enough to crack tile water slapping against walls, in furious waves, and still he fought, still his instincts screamed to finish what he started, still his eyes glowed, cold and ancient above the waterline. Julia's chest heaved once beneath compressions, water gushed from her mouth. Paramedics shouting, "Keep going, she's got a chance, keep pushing, don't stop," and neighbors held their breath, tears streaking faces, hands clutching fence wires until knuckles bled. The world narrowing to the rise and fall of a woman's chest under the brutal Florida sun. The battle between life and the predator written across two fronts. Finally Riff slowed muscles, sagging movements jerking as the tranquilizer seeped into his bloodstream, his body sinking. Deeper into the pool, tail thrashing weakly, jaws loosening at last, and officers exhaled ragged. Breaths dragging his massive bulk toward the deep end, holding poles taut, eyes still wide with fear, because even sedated, an alligator is never truly safe. Instinct never truly sleeps. Paramedics loaded Julia onto a stretcher, straps tightening across her chest. Oxygen mask clamped to her face, her skin ashen, her thigh mangled, shredded muscle and shattered bone visible beneath soaked denim, her pulse. A faint flicker, and one medic whispered, "We're losing her," another shouting, "Move, move, get her in the rig every second." Dripping away like blood into water. The ambulance doors slammed shut, sirens wailed again, rubber burned against asphalt. And the vehicle tore down the road, weaving between cars, lights flashing across citrus groves, neighbors collapsing to their knees, sobbing, holding each other, whispering prayers, watching the dust settle in the heat, knowing they had just seen something they would never unsee, something that would haunt every pool in town. At the hospital, fluorescent lights blazed, cold doctors crowded the stretcher, voices sharp, concise, 4 lines inserted fluids, rushing machines, worry monitors. Screaming flat tones, compressions resumed, blood spilling across white sheet. Surgeons preparing for trauma surgery, the words massive blood loss, repeated the words respiratory failure, repeated the words alligator attack, scribbled into charts with shaky hands. Nurses cut away soaked clothes, revealing flesh torn like paper. Bones shattered beneath skin, deep crescents of teeth marks etched into her thigh. Lacerations across her torso and arms, bruises blooming like dark flowers, her lungs heavy with water, her heart faltering. Her life hanging by threads too thin to see, and still they worked, pounding, pumping, cutting, stitching, replacing what instinct had destroyed. Back at the pool, Riff lay slumped against the deep-end wall, eyes half shut, chest heaving slowly under the weight of tranquilizer. Officers, standing guard, sweat pouring down their temples, radios crackling with updates, neighbors still gathered in silence, candles already appearing on porches, tears streaking faces lit by sunset, the realization sinking in that Clearwater Springs would never be the same. Inside the hospital, Julia's body trembled against machines. Surgeons opening, repairing, suturing, her blood pressure collapsing, her heart stuttering. Monitors shrieking warnings, compressions resuming, adrenaline injections stabbing through skin. Electricity jolting her chest, and still her body resisted. Still the damage screamed too loud. Still the predator's grip echoed inside her every vein and bone. Hours stretched into night, the waiting room filled with neighbors, friends, family, faces, pale eyes, swollen from crying whispers. Echoing through sterile halls, words like miracle, words like hope, words like please. God and outside reporters gathered microphones, ready cameras glowing the phrase. Florida backyard alligator attack. Already stamped across every network ticker, the tragedy going viral before the fight was even over. Doctors finally stepped into the waiting room, faces heavy, voices low, and silence swept the crowd before the words even came. The words, we did everything, the words, the injuries were too severe, the words, she's gone, and sobs broke out like a wave, hands clutching faces, arms holding one another, the reality slamming harder than any tailstrike, the story ending not with survival, but with loss. Back at the pool, officers loaded Riff onto a flatbed, his body still massive, still terrifying, even in sedation. His future sealed by state law. Predators that take human lives cannot remain alive. And the protocol was followed with grim efficiency. A dart, a dose, a silence deeper than any water. The end of a creature that had never stopped being wild, never stopped being what it was born to be. Clearwater Springs mourned together. Vigils held in parks, candles flickering in the dark, photos of Julia smiling, holding small animals. Standing by her pool, even images of her with Riff, when he was small, innocent, almost harmless, those images. Now heavy with sorrow, heavy with the weight of hindsight, heavy with the warning that love cannot erase instinct, that affection cannot rewrite evolution. Experts filled the news, herpetologists on screens, voices steady but heavy, repeating the truth. Domestication is a myth. Predator instinct never dies. Crocodilians cannot be tamed, no matter the years, no matter the affection, no matter the pool in which they float. And the phrase death roll echoed again and again. An ancient design, a perfect mechanism, a survival tool that no bond can undo. Julia's story became more than a tragedy. It became a cautionary tale, a survival story told in reverse, not about escaping death, but about ignoring warnings until death arrived. Not about beating odds, but about forgetting that odds exist. And her name joined the list of those who loved too much, who trusted too deeply, who believed in miracles that nature never promised to give. And still, in the quiet of her house, the cages sat empty, the rooms silent, the towels folded, the feeding spoons set aside, the echoes of her laughter fading through citrus trees, leaving behind only memories, only lessons, only the truth that every survival file is written in blood, in water, in seconds that slip away too fast. And her seconds had run out beneath the Florida sun.